jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Alrighty. Another special guest here today. We got Kris from Real Film Reviewed on the show. How are you?
Hey, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Anytime. So here we are. Let's talk about, again, another filmmaker who's got interesting audience. He's got like a cult, mainstream blockbuster audience, and then he's got, some critical acclaim, some infamous acclaim. It's just like, hey, that's the kind of filmmaker we need to tackle. Someone who's just hard to describe. It varies by every crowd. And so, yeah, here we are. He's just done all kinds of movies, often involving bank robbers, crooked cops, and on some occasions, even superheroes. So it is none other than Mr. David Ayer. Basically, once again, we're seeing a trend here. People who have served in the Navy as submarine sonar technician of all things and made his way into becoming just a screenwriter. You're not going to find this on Wikipedia, but fun fact, his first gig was being a writer on a crappy Steven Seagal movie that premiered on HBO called The Patriot. No relation to the Mel Gibson movie. No one was happy with this movie, so all the writers, when they saw that there were multiple rewrites, went under a different alias, and Ayer was one of the two writers who may or may not be credited. He's either a fourth writer who contributed or something like that, but it's one of those is like, yeah, everyone changed their name because they did not want to be associated with this piece of shit. And he then made the U-571 movie, which was helmed by Jonathan Mostow.
Woke things up a little bit.
That opened up. He wasn't very happy with it because it kind of just basically it was, Americans getting stuff for the British, and the British were just like, no, we're the ones who retrieved codes from these German submarines that we captured, and he was annoyed with how he had to kind of just do a little historical inaccuracy. But I mean, in all fairness, it's popcorn. It's all very loose. Historical fiction is really all it is. And it's a fun cast and everything. And obviously, it's all about the Foley and explosions. So it's not deep like Dawes Boot, but it's definitely catering to that same kind of crowd,
Yeah, I think that's a military thing. I know that he had a little bit of a history before he did that, but before he enlisted in the Navy. But I think I was military, and I don't care for a lot of military movies that civilians typically like.
Oh, good. And it's not his first roundabout, but I can't say it wasn't a bad way to get into the door. It's way better than...
I really enjoyed it.
Well, and because, like you say, so many war movies nowadays just seem to just, I don't know, they just seem to want to just tell the same billion stories and just show a battle. And it's like, I've only seen it, so many different ways to where it just becomes repetitive after a while, But yeah, I mean, I think that's still a way better step and foot in the door as opposed to doing a pretentious sci-fi movie or just a horror thriller that's a knockoff of something, that doing a war adventure film on a submarine with an all-star cast, that's not bad. So then he did some rewrites on the first Fast and Furious movie. I think he still gets some kind of accolades for creating some of those characters, but And then that was the same year that his script for Training Day came to life. And I think that was his main signature style that caught on. And it helped that, he had sold it back in 95 and he didn't have to change a single word of it. All he had to do was just change the ending up because he felt like they were glamorizing the villain.
Yeah. I wasn't the biggest fan of Training. I mean, I enjoyed the movie, but I think it just got a lot more attention. I think the public liked it a lot more than I did. I wasn't that crazy about it. It was all right.
Okay, all good. I'm a huge fan, but I totally get it. I think a lot of movies, I mean, this and Collateral with Tom Cruise, I think were just kind of just the go-to kind of psycho fillers for a while. And it just seemed like, just like in the 90s, if you weren't a fan of, Unlawful Entry or Hand That Rocks the Cradle, then you're kind of a fan of just other kind of Scream type movies. And I think that's just it. It just was all mashing so much together to where it was hard to keep up with it after a while. And it seemed like after a while, I mean, it was doing what basically every kind of Serpico kind of movie was doing. But it's pretty much where both he and Antoine Fuqua just found their voice. It's like Fuqua wanted to do gritty drama, and he wanted to do just adrenaline charged, show. I think he found his voice in that he wants to showcase a mood. He wants to show how everyone can be kind of a douche one minute, and then the next minute they're doing something totally illegal and they're not sure where they fit in. And I think that's why he was perfect to tackle just crime movies the rest of his life.
I think his history is kind of what shaped that. There's a lot of different. I think how people interpreted Training Day and how they felt about it sometimes had a lot to do with how they grew up and where they grew up. I grew up in California, so it wasn't anything new to me. And I think for people that, not necessarily that it was new, they may have known that it existed, but may not have witnessed it firsthand or known anybody that had. And that's real. That was real life for me. That was easy to understand. And for David, I think his thing, when he got kicked out by his parents when he was a teenager, he moved in with his cousin in LA and had a lot of experiences in South Central. And I think for me, when I think of David, I mean, I know he's done a couple of things, but majority of his films have been centered around certain types of specific crime common to that area. Yeah, and that was something that I understood. I didn't necessarily grow up in LA. I grew up in the Bay Area, but my cousins lived in LA and they lived in that area. And, when you visit there and you go around the area, then I did live in LA as I got older, but you get used to what's specific to that area. There's things that are common area everywhere, like police brutality and corruption and, gangs, all that stuff is common in a lot of areas, but specifically in his films, what I think comes through and what he captures really well is South Central. And one of my favorite movies that he did was Harsh Times, and both Harsh Times and End of Watch kind of felt the same to me in terms of the vibe. And I think he did really well at refining that. Oh,
that's his bread and butter. He's like to show a bunch of, because we've had so many other cult movies that kind of would show again moody sides of whether it was South Central or LA, whether it was something like Falling Down or Crash or some other kind of movie like that. And I'm with you, because Harsh Times gets hated on a lot, but often remarked about Christian Bale's performance. But I think it kind of goes way deeper into those kinds of gangs and showing how everyone can be just very aimless and just not know what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And I think he channeled a lot of frustrations as well as what he might have been feeling versus other people he knew. And being a high school dropout who was painting houses, I think that's what influenced his attention to detail. He wanted to utilize and vent that kind of energy. And I think, he rewrote part of SWAT, but I thought that was cool because, especially in Roger Ebert's review, he noted how it gave a different side of just a SWAT team before it eventually goes into Lethal Weapon speed territory where, let's do a giant, rescue and everything. But I think that's just it. He just had these little nuances, and apparently he just was constantly just interacting with people of the LAPD, and he knew about the office politics as well as just how they claim to be progressive and they're just so not acting like they claim to be. And it just doesn't help when, every city, any state has, a cool side, a shady side. And when you have all the systematic, bigotry and just utter imperfections that no one wants to deal with, it just becomes just a constant cluster. And I think, yes, like you say, he shows how he almost always has a character who's like a former jarhead or just someone who is being transferred and not looking forward to working with a new set of crewmates. And essentially, Harsh Times, I think, was definitely where he was going to get a show that showcase more brutality and more just relentless showcase of the various streets that the characters roam. And it was just also cool to just kind of feel like he really was coming into his own, as opposed to doing the billionth Goodfellas or Blood In, Blood Out knockoff,
Yeah.
Because it seemed like everyone would do that for a while. Like they open up, someone does a Godfather type shootout, and then they have, fade to a voiceover, and it's like, no. See, now you're just blurring the line between homage and ripoff. Now it's either way, it's reminding me of a better and arguably superior movie as opposed to letting me see you do your own thing. And I like how he doesn't really do that. He rarely seems to have voiceovers, especially in that one. He could have easily had a voiceover. He didn't. He didn't go there. He just said, "Hey, let's have." It's often compared to Taxi Driver and other movies, but I think it goes beyond just that, because he's not trying to go out of his way to just clean up the streets or anything. He's just showcasing a guy who's friends with a Latino pal of his, and how they're just all just at odds with each other. They don't get along with much of anyone, and he's so ashamed that he just can't pass that drug test and become a cop. And you're glad, because you wouldn't want to see someone like him become a cop, but then you're just like, yeah, how many?
Then they give him which I thought was pretty funny, and I like how David kind of combines his military knowledge, because you do get a lot of knowledge of the government when you serve.
He's using
how
a lot
he was
of
like, well, you can't be a
keywords.
cop, but Homeland Security.
Yeah, that was a good
Totally.
irony, because you're just like,
Yeah. That would happen.
So you'd be profiling, and who knows, you might even have to pick up some of your buddies,
Yeah.
who aren't doing illegal activities. And once he loses his girlfriend and his money, he's just, he makes one stupid decision after another, and it's a mess you can't look away from. But I can see why some people just didn't want to give it the time of day. They just thought, oh, this is stupid, I'm turning it off after 10 minutes. I'm like, really? Oh my God.
It's a different character. I think Christian Bale is what put me off from it before I watched it. But being in LA and living out there, there's a lot of people like that. They grew up like that. Like, just because they're white, they don't, you think that they just don't, like, what are they supposed to do? Just be there and not be cool with anybody that lives around them. Inevitably, when you're young enough and you're in that environment, no matter what nationality you are, if that's where you grew up, you have your homies that you hang with. And he's got that in the Tax Collector too. That was another one. He had Shia LaBeouf kind of playing not a similar role, but a similar role.
The same kind of deal. Everyone was like either put off by the casting or not sure about it. And I think it also helped that he had Cleve Sloan, who was a former gangbanger, playing the same guys in that. And, from Training Day. So that was a cool connection, but everyone didn't notice. You're like, oh, Bone. Yeah. The same guy from Training Day isn't here. He appears in Into Watch and Street Kings as different characters, but is he really? You never know. He's also in Bright. But I like how Antoine Fuqua used him as well, and even did a documentary on him. So Fuqua's doing his own thing, but I love how Ayer, and by making just very visual, just type of movies that often end in a cool standoff. But Ayer's he's got the dialogue down to where I never feel like he's just being a Tarantino knockoff, and Tarantino's already not doing a knockoff to begin with, but that's what makes him what he is. He takes what he loves and puts it into it, and I think Ayer was always quoted as saying, "I want to do something different each go around it while doing my own kind of thing," and I'm like, that's cool because you're gonna do what you're comfortable with, and then just kind of add different kinds of flavor each time, as opposed to be too indirect about what you want to do. And I think that's just it. Too many filmmakers, when they're starting out, want to just be a mercenary for hire, and then as a result, they don't really get to helm their signature right away. And he's pretty much, since he was already behind the camera writing, he already knew how he would handle a movie if he were directing it, since he saw how it could change in the process.
Yeah.
So he followed it up with Street Kings, and this time he was just, producing and made his directorial debut. And I think by this point, I was just a hardcore fan for life. It's like, and it got wailed on, like, and same kind of deal. Everyone was like, "Oh, I like Keanu
Street
Reeves."
Kings was okay.
Not a fan. Oh man,
It wasn't that it was bad. It was okay. It was okay. It wasn't a bad film. I'm not really, well, no, I can't really say that. I think at the time I wasn't super into Paul Walker.
It's Keanu Reeves.
My bad. Keanu Reeves. Sorry. I was thinking of the Fast and the Furious, because that's what I was looking at on my list. But no,
not
Keanu Reeves. That was my thing, is that I didn't really buy him in that role with what I had been seeing him in, and it just.
Well, yeah, he's a limited actor, and that's just it. But for me, this was his return to be doing a Speed kind of role, as opposed to just more Matrix, Point Break type movies. And it's like, it opens up, same kind of deal. He's not sober, and his wife died years ago. That's all you need to know. But he does little subtleties here that, like, just looking around aimlessly or just at odds. And I liked how, he worked with James Ellroy, who's quite the character, and then he had Kurt Wimmer from Equilibrium, who would do other movies like Salt and just the horror film Spell, as well as Law Abiding Citizen, which Ayer did rewrites of. And
Love that.
Oh, totally. Ayer's done a lot of rewrites of other movies in between, including Taking Lives with Ethan Hawke. But this one I felt like it's just like, okay, so again, you got a bad cop who doesn't want to do the bad shit anymore. And so it is kind of like Elroy doing kind of his LA Confidential kind of style, but in a today's society where, again, he's already having to be a poster boy basically for the camera, and Graham Revell's music is just perfectly complementing how just, again, it could easily be an episode of The Shield. And I'm not saying that just because Forrest Whitaker's in it. I'm saying it because it's just showing how everybody basically is just vicious and has nothing nice to say about one another. And you got internal affairs breathing down his neck, but it stands out in that, aside from the cast, you got a bunch of rappers like The Game, and this was definitely the first thing I saw Common in. Well, I take it back. I've seen him in American Gangster, but this was
I was trying to think if this was the first thing that I saw Common in it, but I can't.
It's definitely.
It was one of the first. I'll say that.
It's definitely an underrated Chris Evans role for me, and I know he was just known for dorky comedies at that point, and those awful Fantastic Four movies. But this was before Captain America, and I was like, yeah, see, he's pretty witty because he's just the plant. He's just sent by internal affairs to keep an eye on him, and just having his nickname being Disco, and how that's just it. To them, doing raids is a dance, but this is even more hard because it does take even a rewatch to realize it's like, okay, these two cops that came in here and killed Reeves's partner, he's already got a badass name, Tom Ludlow. And it's like, yeah, so your partner who was going to turn you into internal affairs got killed. Was it by, crooked cops, or was it by robbers? You don't know until the very end. So there's plenty of suspects. So when I saw people saying, oh, it's so predictable, I'm like, no. See, that part is not predictable. Knowing that the captain's behind it, sure. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, and that's what I liked about it. That's why I'm like, it wasn't a bad film, and that was I enjoyed the twists that it took us on.
But that's just it. You don't know if he's going to turn himself in or go down. And it's like, no, eventually it comes down to the whole, they're all loose cannons and, in suits. And so you pretty much got to end them. It is training day-ish. And I love how someone made some poster art showing how Ludlow is in the car with Denzel's detective Harris from Training Day. Someone did something of that years ago. I was like, that I would love to see him connect his whole world one of these days, since most of them are through Fox, but it won't happen. But that would be cool. I even made a Wicca in his name years ago. But so that brought him then to End of Watch, and that got him more. And finally, that was where he finally seemed to get both critic and audience approval. And
that almost made me want to be a cop after watching that.
Which is so weird, because it's like, who wants to be a traffic cop? It's not exciting. Right. It's exhausting. It's shitty. And everyone's got testosterone, as opposed to just coming home from work feeling like you made a difference. And I mean, it just made good use of its gimmick, just showing the camera on the, suits, and showing how everyone just thinks they're hot shit 1 minute, and then, I gotta take this seriously. And it was the same kind of deal. It was like, I don't really consider Jake Gyllenhaal an action guy, and I like Michael Pena, but is he ready to lead a movie? And it just surprised me. So I think he really is good at using actors, and it speaks to them, because they're like, this isn't just stupid or unorganized or, a dumb, dorky Lethal Weapon knockoff. This is actually pretty key. It's pretty engaging. So I think they just light up with his dialogue, and I never felt like he was a Michael Mann knockoff or anything. So I think that helps.
It was one of those movies where you kind of you don't want to cry, but you do at the same time. It's just like, that danced on a nerve, and being military, and I think that's one of the best things that I like about him is his ability to combine his experiences and really let it come out, and being able to make Jake Gyllenhaal feel something is impressive. It's not that he doesn't in a lot of movies, but not every director can bring that out of
often.
Jake. Yeah. I ripped him on one review of Guilty, because it's just like, gosh, I'm just so sick of you being so unemotional in your films and getting away with it. Not every director lets him get away with it, and he really brought it out in that
Prisoners
one. So that was a great performance. The only time I've seen him.
Oh yeah, but Prisoners is like the only time I've really seen him be emotional. Besides this one, the rest of the time he's just kind of just stood there as if they didn't know what to tell him, and it's just like, okay, so do I. And I don't know. I think at this point he wanted to work with someone who was more experimental, because he had a bad experience working with David Fincher on Zodiac, apparently.
I mean, yeah.
I can
understand.
Yeah, because he likes to do multiple takes of everything, and I don't know. Some people need to stay in their cage and realize, okay, just do your best. But there's other times where it's like, dude, can we go home now?
Yeah, and I just worry about that being a thing with me on set. I'm hoping that it doesn't end up being that way, where I just get stuck in my craft, because I'm a former athlete, and we would be out there late, like coach wouldn't let us go home until we got things right. So I'm just like, but you have to, at the same time, people aren't going to they're not going to get it right if they don't have rest and food and sleep, and so.
Oh, totally. And if you're just doing a lot of things, eventually you're like, am I doing something wrong? I'm having doubts now.
Yeah, me being the editor I am, it's kind of difficult to be a director and an editor. It's like, if we just shoot it correctly, I won't have to edit this so much. But at the same time, you have to not be so overbearing.
Say something, man. So, yeah, he follows it up with two movies in 2014. He's got Sabotage with Arnold and company, and a bunch of other, actors in just unrecognizable roles. Annabelle Wallace, Terrence Howard, Joe Manganiello. And it's like, Jesus, I've never seen them in any of these kinds of roles. And Sam
Right.
Worthington, so another Terminator actor, and
Ugh.
he's again a guy who I've seen be very shallow in other things, and here it's like I would have never guessed that was him. And not Annabelle Wallace, Mary Ellen Enos, but same year as the war movie Fury, which I actually got to see in theaters and was blown away.
Oh, yeah, I would have loved to have seen that in theaters.
And I see a lot of people shit on that one because the same thing. They're just like, they couldn't separate Shia LaBeouf, and I didn't see anyone. I just saw an old 50s style war B picture with everyone just showing how after a while, again, he's really good at showing, much like he is with the cops doing the whole, hey, I shot him, but he deserved it. He was shitty, even though I filled out the paperwork the wrong way. He does the same thing with the war guys. It's like, okay, we're committing war crimes, but it's all good because they're Nazis. So I like how he's just showing the distortion, but instead of, anyone else would just like to have an actor play to the camera. Instead of just doing that, he just always, again, he just ratchets up the dialogue. He just really gives you an idea. It's like, yeah, see, that's not too fancy. It doesn't sound like, again, you just want to do a lot of too clever for its own good wordplay. You really are trying to actually make them sound different because this is just how they talk. And I wouldn't be surprised if you studied some cops on the job and you're just like, yeah, I'm going to work in this guy. He's worried about his burger getting cold in the car. He's worried about his gun, not being imposing enough, or making some other just off-color jokes where everyone's like, yeah, you suck, but we'll have a beer with you. Because who else are we going to be accepted by? So I see a lot of people well on this one, and I'm in the camp that considers it one of Arnold's most underrated movies. And again, there's another guy who he had charm, but you never really went to his movies because he's an actor, and I didn't even see him after a while. I'm like, really, this is Schwarzenegger? This is not a typical Arnold. Not at any point do I get the, him punching someone in the face, or just typical Arnold. And after a while, I mean, it's interesting how I just love how there's other twists where his unit is getting shut down and the DEA is having to play politics to where they're just like, okay, you can recover the money, but we'll always suspect that you stole it. But I just really dig the serial killer plot as well, because it's not trying to be the billionth, Seven or Saw type knockoff. Instead, it's just more just like, yeah, these are guys who have done bad things to members of the team before, and now you're all going to probably be victims because, again, you took all this dirty cartel money.
Yeah.
It's irrefutable, and yet it has consequences. You're going to wind up dead, and we're not going to just simply do an explosion. We're going to probably do something way more vicious.
He's kind of Tarantino in that way, where he'll set them up, but then make them pay for it.
Totally, and I feel like we're just in a very... I mean, we mentioned Fast and Furious earlier. I'm the same kind of way where I'm just so tired of everyone just being contrarian. They're cool with seeing something stupid in Fast and Furious, but if another movie that's like an Expendables kind of not, homage to like earlier 80s and 90s movies comes out, they instantly wail and do the whole, it's so dumb. I'm like, but it's making fun of those dumb movies you grew up with. So what's different? And same kind of thing kind of here is like, this is kind of trying to be kind of a, Tarantino, Michael Mann-esque in that it's got multiple things going on and it's putting as much detail to the characters' bizarre motivations as it is the gunfire. And yet so many people just love to dwell on it, saying, I can't get into it. And I think it's easily one of Skip Wood's best screenplays. And he's one who gets wailed on all the time for his, just because was often, aside from Swordfish, he was often the go-to for just rewriting a bunch of movies for Fox. And I think it was
Swordfish was just perfect. Loved it.
Well, totally. And I think this was his attempt to go back to I don't have to worry about doing anything. I'm just going to come up with a twisted premise, and
Yeah.
I think it still did a lot of good considering how the studio had to cut out so much to avoid getting like an X rating or some shit like that. And it seems like, again, I see so many people well on it, and I hate it when I'm in a scenario where critics I typically disagree with get it. Like
Which
Richard
happens
Roper,
to me every single time. Every time I disagree,
yeah,
that every time, it's that film that I like go to bat for, then the critics agree with me, and I'm like, man, that tends to happen.
this is so weird. And yeah, and Richard Roper gets this, and yet he hated Training Day, and but he likes SWAT though. So I don't know. I don't know what fuels him, and
So SWAT was entertaining. I'm kind of the same way. I didn't hate Training Day. I probably won't watch it again. So I guess that means that I don't necessarily care for it. And people that like it love it. And it wasn't bad. It just wasn't my thing. But
yeah, but he was like, it doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. And I'm like, well,
right.
That cinematography gets me into the LA landscape. But
yeah, I mean, see, that's another thing. I'm like, growing up in LA or not in LA, growing up in California, and then like visiting in LA and then living in LA. It's just like, okay, yeah, I have my thing with LA, so I never really blame the movie.
It's all good. I like how it shows its vicious nature as opposed to making it all pretty and fancy.
Yeah, which is what the majority of it is. Then that's the funny part. I'm like, oh, you're talking about a very specific area that you can pretty much see all in Pretty Woman. That's the area that you are thinking that is like, that's not real. That's not real LA. Celebrities don't live there. They live in outskirts of that. That's
right.
Why Kobe Bryant was getting helicoptered in. Like
maybe the valley, man.
Close. Yeah.
But no, this is weird. Rupert compares Sabotage to a spaghetti western, but then he's like, it's not trying to be David Fincher-ish. Well, why would you even want to even bring that even remotely up? So not everything has to be as awesome as David Fincher to be a good movie. So this is my deal. I don't like to compare people if there's just so unlike stuff, like if I see a Michael Bay movie, I'm not going to say, just don't expect David Lynch. I'm like, well, not even remotely in the same ballpark.
Right. I mean, there's a whole lot of, I remember when I learned that James Wan was doing Aquaman, I was like, what? I'm down. I'm going to watch it. That might be interesting. And then I saw the previews, and visually, I was like, yeah, I have to see this. This is going to be decent.
So
there everybody's like, he's the horror guy. And I'm like, that's probably why he's doing this.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He wants to do something he just gets attached to. He's like a comic book guy. I'm not a fan of his Saw movies, but I find him a very interesting guy just to hear in interviews. And I think after Death Sentence,
it was a completely different idea from what was going on at the time, when the first Saw came out, because if you remember what was coming out back then, that was like The Grudge.
Well, that's that too. I already had fallen off the map in terms of horror movies, and Wishmaster and
bad.
Other 90s movies got me back into the fold. But yeah, I would see there would always be a serial killer movie, and this kind of comes us back to here is like, I don't get a Seven vibe or even Law Abiding Citizen vibes too much. I feel like this is a closer Punisher movie than any of the actual Punishers.
That's a fair point. Yeah,
this is what it would be
I can
like.
See that,
because for a while it just seemed like everything has to be fun, a slasher, but it's funny like Scream, or it must be just clever. He's got all the characters' blood and he has messages for the main guy. Only he is smart enough to figure it out. It's like no, just stop. It's been done to death, literally. And I think hit this and Fury back to back. He lost the studio battle with Sabotage, but yet most of the fans were able to see through and find it very entertaining, and those who never gave it the time of day didn't. But Fury was the same kind of deal. I mean, those who weren't into war movies didn't even bother going to it, and those who liked the cast that, I've never seen that side of Brad Pitt. I've seen him play all kinds of, moody guys. But yeah, I think now everyone just shits on him because he just did, Suicide Squad and Bright back to back. And I think it was just one of those where, again, the studios just want to continually edit him, and I don't know if he's trying to be a Sam Peckinpah type where he just wants final cut on everything, or if he just goes over time or budget. I don't know. Well, why is this happening?
That's a fair. I'm curious as well to find out what exactly it is.
Do they just think they'll get an X rating because stuff is violent? And I'm like, there's way more stuff that should get an X, but for violence. But
that's hands down. I'm like, well, I'm a veteran that can attest to the fact that I was pretty desensitized when I was in war zone situations compared to, and that came from just watching a lot of gory movies that you don't really process what's happening in front of you because you're like, oh, I feel like I've seen that a million times. Well, yeah, but this is real. Like, okay, but it doesn't make it any
doesn't make it any less real. So he does these both back to back, and Suicide Squad, I think there are fun elements. It's just the Jared Leto Joker is the one that pisses everyone off, but I really do feel like they blend as a team if you take away all the other stuff.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed Suicide Squad and the combination that they had, and I'm a big Jared Leto fan, so I was interested to see the combination of him. And
even then, I don't even see Leto. It's just everyone, I don't know. It seems like this is where everything had to be compared to one another, and I was just like, I just think it has a fun sense of humor about it. Now, the director's cut apparently would include more Joker stuff to where there's enough for another movie. I think they need to proceed carefully if they actually do want to do a director's cut, but I don't know. I was just fine for just, again, just how the whole team comes together and just the other nuances. Would I ever rank it as an absolute top 10 movie? No, but I still feel like everyone got a lot of things to do. Like, Boomerang was a lot of fun, and that says a lot because I had been so disappointed with Jay Courtney and his previous movie and TV appearances. And I mean, Viola Davis was great as Amanda Waller, and I'm glad that some of the elements carried over into the other Suicide Squad films, but it just seemed like he had to bear it all. Oh, totally. And I think everyone had to just bear all that grief. They just had to wail on him, act like he was responsible for it all when they knew damn well that the studio had, again, just like with Justice League, taken it away from him. He had no say about it. And I like how, unlike anyone else, he doesn't go on too many tangents. He wants to move on instantly. He's already kind of had his street cred, so to speak, no pun intended. And he's just like, yeah, okay, next one. Hit me.
Versus Zack Snyder that will re-release the movie that he wanted to do. Triple the time. Like,
or even pull a Scorsese and do the whole, I hate everything. Come see my new boring 3-hour piece of shit. So Bright, I found it okay, but it didn't leave much of an impression on me.
Same. And it felt like iRobot in a different version.
Yeah, Will is basically
that could have been Will Smith's fault, but
well, that and he and Joel Edgerton seem to be getting along, but I blame it mainly on Max Landis because Max is a total Twitter troll, and it was just one of those where I haven't really cared for anything he's done, and I just like nothing personal. It has nothing to do with your dad being a terrible person. I'm just saying, I think my main issue is he just loves to act like, oh, I made such original movies that the studios don't get. I'm like, I'm not getting any original stuff from this.
Right.
This is Alien Nation meets Lord of the Rings. I mean, Will Smith even said it's Training Day meets Lord of the Rings. I'm like, well,
yeah,
it's whatever. It's just a weird ass movie. I don't think they'll ever make a sequel to it because though
they're making a sequel to it.
They really are? Okay.
I
thought they had abandoned that idea, but they kept
So did I. I was really surprised when that came up. I was like, oh, really?
I mean, it could definitely expand, but it would have been just better as a show, like a 6-part miniseries or something, Because
that would have been a better place for it, yeah.
Because it goes by so fast and has so many music montages that don't feel like his typical style. And when I got back to The Tax Collector, it got wailed upon again. And I couldn't tell how many of these critics were just like corporate tools who just got a will on anyone, not let him catch a break. It kind of felt like they were doing what they do with Kevin Smith or anyone else who's trying something different. And I was just like, this is way better than it's like 20% like grade on whatever critic site. I mean, because I got what I expected. I got a return to literally the first year of Ayer's work. I saw everyone again. His casting is just on the nose. You knew Jimmy Smith was in it, but you didn't know he was the main, mentioned villain, the wizard. I'm like, damn, okay,
True.
cool.
Same with Jared Leto. I mean, I knew it was Jared Leto, and like you mentioned, you don't even see him. I agree. I knew it was Jared Leto, but I didn't see him as Jared Leto through the whole film. And obviously there's the credit to the actor as well, but it's just the interpretation, the way that he brought it to the screen.
It seems like after a while, you can't tell if the critics are just wailing on someone because they follow
They don't like
tabloids
the
too
actors.
closely. Yeah.
I just have a feeling it's that because I do that with my reviews. I will try and I always tell myself, try and keep your bias out of this. And I'll fully admit to everybody, okay, I'm not the biggest fan, but if I like what they do, then I'll say that. I'm like, I'm not the biggest fan of them usually, and this one I really enjoyed because that's, in my opinion, I think it's important for people to know if you don't like that person that this film is still worthy or still decent. Even
Well,
though
and
that
anyone can be
person's in
well
it, or-
used, even in a good or a bad role. It's just like,
Yeah,
there's plenty of actors who I don't care for, but I can't. There's some cases where I'm like, yeah, I probably would have done a shitty job with that material too, because it's just feels like something's being cut out. And again, as so many people wail on something right away, and that's why I feel like the theater actually takes away from the experience half the time, because you're just responding to all the loud Foley and all the visuals just being unleashed upon you. And I don't even know why everyone wants the reviews then and there when they're more likely going to disagree with the mainstream critics anyway and go to their favorite YouTuber or podcast review it. And I think a lot of his movies do have a loyal audience, because I always get someone who says, oh, I love the hell out of Street Kings or Sabotage or Training Day. And then I see others who are like, yeah, I've liked one or two of his movies. He's overrated. But it's like, that's still something if in some case.
Yeah, I wouldn't say overrated at all, but yeah, that's me.
Imperfect. Sure. Who isn't? That there's plenty of movies by the greats that I don't like. I mean, we were talking when we talked about Brian De Palma. We're like, we feel like he's made more bad movies than good movies, but yet we really like him.
Yeah,
especially when he is good. So, I mean, I don't go by a numbers game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an M. Night Shyamalan fan for the same reason.
So am
There's
I.
some movies that people really hate and that I don't like, but I'll see pretty much I'll see all of them because sometimes they're great, and when they're great, they're great.
By 2008, he was, before everyone was finding out, he had been edited, and he literally he went back to film school and rediscover himself and do low budget movies for a bigger return. It just seemed like everyone just wailed on him all at once. He learned the hard way that, again, people are still going by the "you're only as good as your last movie" logic. And
if you went by that, he wouldn't be successful at all. But yeah,
and it's just like he had to just go in little avenues, it was a maze, and he was constantly being slaughtered by like 10 different minotaurs. And it was just like, man, it's wild. Oh, so what would you like to see from this guy? It seems like he was attached to the Wild Bunch remake, and he was going to remake Scarface, and they let him go because it was just too gruesome. Shocker! What do you want from a Scarface movie?
Right.
I would like to see him get away from the whole remake train. I know he's better than that. I know he can do more than that. It's just, I also know I'm not surprised if he just decides to not do anything but crime movies.
I mean, I know. I'm trying to think of what it would be decent, because I feel like he's done he writes different, like even if he doesn't direct them, he writes a lot of films that maybe not necessarily are super different, but they are very different from each other, and the characters are entirely different. The emotion, the vibe is different, and the production design is always different. So every view that I get from him, that's a decent question. I actually wouldn't mind seeing him do a Batman movie, or like you mentioned earlier, a Punisher movie. And you don't have to do those; don't need to be remakes. There's thousands of stories that you can choose from. You can tell a specific story of one of something that they did. There's a lot of material, obviously, in both, and
He's
I'm
in a
kind
weird
of
predicament because it's like the studios will still give him money, and yet it just seems like
this
he's
is
up-
just if he made it the way he made it. So that's the way I
Oh,
look at
totally.
it. If I could get anything out of him the way he would want it, that's what I would want to see.
he's made enough money just about every time, and it just seems like they'll keep giving him a little bit of freedom. But yet, these last few times, he's kind of been very annoyed because they really have heavily edited his movies. So it just makes you wonder, is he just saying one or two things, or saying duly noted to a studio executive, or pretending to go along with them when he could probably convince them that their idea is his idea? Because I don't know. I think he took the Suicide Squad thing really hard, so I can't really see him wanting to revisit comic books again anytime soon. But he may very well, if that's where the money is and he gets a little freedom. So I don't know. I really don't know. I'd like to see him do an anthology.
I know they announced the end of watch series. I'm not certain when it's coming.
Really?
Out, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's been his best critic and audience score, so I would not be surprised. But he was heavily involved with the Training Day TV show and like wrote the concept for it and everything. And I actually dug that show, and because it Bill Paxton was again being his most awesome self, but it was really tied in. Like they were former partners of Alonzo's crew. They kind of had an Illuminati kind of weird crime conspiracy going on there, and they even had the Three Wise Men, or at least two of them, reappear, as well as some of the other dirty cops from the movie. So, and it only lasted a season, but a lot of those actors have gone on to bigger things, and that co-creator was also like a former LAPD turned writer, and Ayer worked with him on his short-lived Fox show, Deputy, which had Stephen Dorff, and same kind of deal. I was like, man, this is a return to what the earlier Ayer works that I like seeing. And again, it's just 13 episodes later and it's canceled. I'm like, well, at least it went out with a bang, both of them. So
yeah.
I even told him on his Twitter the day it was canceled, I'm like, you deserve better. And he liked the comment. I'm like, okay, perfect. I think he knows where his real fandom is and where his bread. Fortunately, a lot of it is his bread and butter. So I think, yeah, he might do another comic book thing, but it's going to have to be one which only he could adapt. That no one else.
Bright 2 is kind of, it's not really a comic book, but it is kind of comic booky.
It's basically as close as he's going to get, because he doesn't have to get a note from someone saying, hey, you got to change this to be more like this. So I will see, but I light up whenever I hear his name. I'm like, okay, so there's going to be some intriguing dialogue in a very intense situation. So I want to give it a rent or watch it on TV when it premieres.
Yeah. That'll be decent.
No. So thank you ever so much for being on here. So I'll let you plug Real Film Reviewed real fast.
Oh, yeah. So my podcast is Real Film Reviewed, and on that show, I do predominantly short spoiler-free reviews followed by a post-viewing discussion. So I will give a spoiler warning in the middle, let everybody
Warning,
jump
you've
off.
been spoiled.
Yeah, no, I never want to do that, and I keep it pretty general for the spoilers. I'm very, very specific that, like, on my Twitter even, and on usually about the first 5 to 7 minutes are all spent on the spoiler-free review. I give the technical details, who directed it and all of that. And then I'll do a little short spoiler alert and then go into a post-viewing discussion so that way I can just kind of dive into my thoughts on it. I'm always big on saying I don't recommend films. I just review them. So regardless if I liked them or not, I'll do a review regardless on it. But I do have kind of a scale. And I
so
always
you do
talk
trigger
about
warning without even saying it.
yeah, pretty much. And it's, I went to film school and it's a passion of mine. I'm a filmmaker myself.
Nice.
So that's kind of
which one?
I went to so part of it was the LA Film School, and then the second for where I actually finished is at Scottsdale Community College.
Hey, at least it wasn't
but
UT.
I'm continuing on to GCU, so I'm doing the master's program and stuff too. So
at least it wasn't UT Arlington.
Oh, nice, awesome.
No, not awesome. That's what I'm saying. At least it wasn't that.
Hey, it's all good. I was impressed with the education I got. I think SCC was a lot better. LA Film School was cool. It was just really expensive for pretty much the same stuff that I got available at SCC. So that was a really great school and had a lot of great professors that worked in the industry and got us connected with a lot of people that actively were working in the industry. And it was awesome. It gave us a lot of great experience. And it actually served me very well being a podcaster because, in film school, you take a lot of, broadcasting, sound design and stuff like that. And I'm like, I know how important sound is, but you really understand that when you become a podcaster. And I'm like, I'm so glad that I still have my notes and stuff.
Yeah, but, right. I still have some of those where it's like, man, it's some great notes and no one wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to talk about, hey, study this film scene. I'm like, we've studied it. We know why it works. How can we make ours work? And
and that's pretty much all I cared about.
Distributing this stuff without them saying, "Oh, but it's not shot on a whatever," that someone I love uses. It's like, you're right. It's not shot on any of those because I'm not Soderbergh. I'm not Chris Nolan. I'm not even Michael Bay. I'm not any of those guys. I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to make a movie that you'll want to actually see and not fast forward through on Amazon Prime or Angelica Theater.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I look for different ways to break into stuff. So that's why I started Real Productions, which is the production company that I produce everything through.
Oh, real.
And that way I'm like, you know what? I'll just make my own movies rather than trying to have somebody else make it. But what I am doing using my podcast is occasionally I'll do some original content episodes. And those are like the little script reads segments that I do. And I'll read from original scripts that I've written. And right now I'm doing the limited series 13 Ghosts. So I wrote a limited series on 13 Ghosts, exactly like what you were saying. I wrote it kind of more, really for anybody who'll pick it up. But I was ideally envisioning it to be a limited series on Netflix and for them to be about 45 to 50-minute long episodes. And everybody's so far is liking it, so it's been a good. We're working on. I think I'm doing 13 total. Yeah, 13 episodes. So that's it.
No, that's good because I've tried web series that were inspired or technically a fan film.
Yeah,
and some people just don't get it. They're like, "Oh, we're doing a recreation for your college class or school." I'm like, no, not at all. But you're right in that I probably can't compensate you if the rules dictate that. So yeah, there's that. But it does get annoying in that, yes, you have to pretty much read everyone through and through. You have to tell them, hey, we're going to do it this way or that way. I'm not working with your other friend who's ripped off other people or has a bad reputation with these people. We've got to make a movie. We got to do it on time, on budget, and we got to do that. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's harder to tell other people too, especially when you haven't made it yet.
Yes. It's the vision.
It's different.
But yeah, I'm available. So the podcast is available everywhere you listen to podcasts. If not, you can always let me know and I will get it on there. But Twitter is RealFilmPKC and the website is real-film-review.productions.
Sweet.
Thank you, man. It was a pleasure being on, and it's always a lot of fun. And I could talk all day about movies, but for time, I know you're probably late for your thing, but it was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. This was a delight.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be
could
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
Greetings, friends. My name is Dean Legero, and I'm the host of the 3324 podcast. I invite you to join me and my lifelong friend Eric Kuber to come with us as we discuss the music and movies that shaped our life. Each week, we'll pick an album or film that we really connect to, and not only give you some great info and trivia, but also discuss, debate, and celebrate what it means to us and the journey it took us on. We also look forward to hearing from you and giving us some of your picks for us to check out and discuss. I think it'll be a really fun experience, so come along with us for the ride. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider and at 3324.buzzsprout.com. Thanks for your time, and welcome to the 3324 family.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes of gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Follow follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up